What if the Bible holds prophecies about black peoples that have been buried for centuries? Historical misinterpretations have obscured these profound truths, casting shadows over cultural identity and ancestral pride. Yet within ancient civilizations and their enduring secrets lies the key to reclaiming this lost heritage. Throughout history, biblical narratives have been twisted to serve destructive agendas. Prophecies that should have affirmed the dignity of African peoples were instead misused to justify centuries of injustice, from slavery to systemic discrimination. This distortion created a void in historical understanding, separating generations from their spiritual birthright. The consequences echo through time, leaving cultural identities fractured and ancestral stories untold. Reclaiming these truths requires peeling back layers of deliberate misinterpretation, examining scriptures with fresh eyes, and restoring what was deliberately obscured. The very foundation of cultural heritage depends on this correction, making the journey not merely academic, but essential for collective identity and pride. Before these shadows fell, magnificent kingdoms rose across the African continent, their splendor etched forever in biblical lore. The empire of Kush, with its towering pyramids piercing the sky, stood as a testament to architectural genius and spiritual depth. Ethiopia's royal dynasties, mentioned with reverence in sacred texts, governed lands where wisdom and power intertwined. These civilizations were not peripheral to biblical history. They were central to its unfolding drama, their achievements celebrated in verses that have endured for millennia. The grandeur of these realms, their gold, their innovation, their devotion, lends undeniable weight to the prophecies connected to them. To understand these ancient glories is to grasp the profound significance of what was prophesied about their people. Now, the path forward becomes clear. An immersive journey through time and scripture awaits. This cinematic exploration will navigate the corridors of ancient texts, unearthing passages long overlooked or misunderstood. Step by step, prophecy by prophecy, the narrative will unfold, revealing how divine words spoken millennia ago directly concern the destiny of black peoples. This is not merely a historical study, but a quest for truth that promises to reshape understanding. The journey begins here, guided by careful examination and a commitment to illumination, inviting all who seek to reclaim their place in sacred history. Within the weathered pages of specific biblical books, clues await discovery. The scroll of Isaiah contains mysterious oracles that speak of African nations in coded language. The Psalms whisper promises about Ethiopia that few have fully deciphered. These texts, when examined with precision and cultural context, reveal patterns that point to a larger design, a divine plan that centrally includes peoples of African descent. The secrets aren't hidden because they're unimportant. They're concealed by layers of selective interpretation and cultural bias. Yet once unlocked, these passages become keys to understanding not just ancient history, but ongoing spiritual identity. The full revelation of what these books contain could transform how entire generations view their heritage and destiny. The implications of these prophecies extend far beyond ancient history into the very heart of modern identity. When a people cannot see themselves in the sacred texts that shape civilizations, something essential is lost, a spiritual inheritance that rightfully belongs to them. Continued misinterpretation doesn't merely distort the past, it actively undermines cultural confidence in the present. The stakes could not be higher. Without reclaiming these prophetic truths, generations risk living with a fractured understanding of their place in divine narrative. But with accurate interpretation comes restoration of pride, of purpose, of connection to a heritage that spans both time and eternity. This isn't just about correcting historical record. It's about healing cultural memory and empowering future generations with truths that have been withheld for far too long. Before we embark deeper into these revelations, ensure you don't miss what comes next. Subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell. This journey through biblical mysteries has only just begun. More profound insights into African heritage and scriptural truth await in upcoming explorations that will continue to illuminate hidden histories. The commitment remains unwavering to deliver transformative insights that reconnect a people with their prophetic destiny. This exploration will uncover biblical evidence that affirms the significant role of Black peoples in sacred history, truths that have been overlooked but never erased. The enigmatic question posed at the beginning finds its answer in the careful examination of scriptures that follow. What emerges is not merely new information, but a restored narrative that has the power to reshape identity and heritage. The journey promises nothing less than the recovery of what was always meant to be known and celebrated. To fully grasp these prophetic revelations, we must first establish their foundation in biblical genealogy. The lineage of Ham, Noah's son traditionally associated with African peoples, provides the essential framework for understanding how these prophecies connect to specific nations and cultures. This genealogical groundwork creates the necessary context for the extraordinary claims found in prophetic books. As we transition from mysterious questions to systematic exploration, the narrative shifts from what might be true to what the texts actually reveal. The path now leads directly into the family records that form the bedrock of these prophetic connections. The biblical narrative begins its account of human diversity after the Great Flood, tracing all peoples back to Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. While Shem's lineage connects to Semitic peoples and Japheth's to European and Asian groups, Ham's descendants populate the African continent and beyond, according to Genesis chapter 10. This foundational genealogy establishes the starting point for understanding how specific prophecies later address these distinct family lines. The sons of Ham, Kush, Misraim, Put, and Canaan, become the progenitors of nations that feature prominently in both biblical history and prophecy. Their stories, when properly examined, reveal a tapestry of divine interaction with African peoples that challenges simplified readings of Scripture and opens new dimensions of understanding for those seeking their place in biblical narrative. In the aftermath of the Great Flood, when the waters receded and the earth began anew, a divine blueprint for humanity's repopulation was set in motion. The book of Genesis reveals how Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the architects of the world's nations. Shem would become the progenitor of the Semitic peoples, his lineage giving rise to the Arabs, Jews, and Syrians. Japheth's descendants would spread across Europe and Asia, their cultures and languages diversifying across continents. But it was Ham, the middle son, whose destiny was uniquely intertwined with the African continent. Biblical tradition consistently identifies Ham as the ancestral father of African and Black peoples, his name forever linked to the rich tapestry of civilizations that would emerge from the soil of Africa. This foundational division of humanity establishes the crucial framework through which we must understand the biblical narrative of origins and identity. The name Ham itself carries profound significance in the ancient languages of the biblical world. In Hebrew and Aramaic, the name translates to burned or dark, a linguistic clue that has been interpreted by scholars as describing his physical characteristics. This etymological connection suggests descriptions of dark hair and skin, attributes that would become characteristic of his descendants. The very name serves as a linguistic anchor, tying Ham's identity to the appearance and heritage of the peoples who would spring from his lineage. This naming convention was not accidental in ancient texts. Names often carried prophetic weight and descriptive power, providing insight into the character and destiny of individuals and their offspring. The meaning embedded within Ham's name thus becomes our first key to understanding the biblical portrayal of African origins. Within the genealogical records of Genesis chapter 10, the family of Ham unfolds with precise detail, revealing 4 sons who would become the founding fathers of significant nations. Cush, the firstborn, whose name would echo through the annals of African history. Misraim, whose legacy would become synonymous with one of the world's most magnificent civilizations. Put, whose descendants would populate northern regions of the continent. And Canaan, whose story would become among the most misunderstood in biblical interpretation. These four sons represent the primary branches of Ham's lineage, each destined to establish peoples and kingdoms that would shape the course of African history. Their collective legacy forms the bedrock upon which we can trace the biblical connection to African civilizations, a genealogical map that guides our understanding of how these ancient populations spread across the continent. Kush, Ham's firstborn, emerged as perhaps the most prolific of the brothers in terms of his ancestral reach. The biblical record identifies him as the father of the Ethiopians, the Nubians, and numerous other African peoples, whose kingdoms would rise to prominence along the Nile and beyond. The kingdom of Kush itself, located in what is now Sudan, became a civilization of remarkable achievement, known for its pyramids, advanced ironworking, and powerful monarchs. But Kush's influence extended even further. Biblical and historical sources suggest connections to populations in South India and throughout various regions of Africa, including the Mali, Eritrean, Kenyan, and Gabonese peoples. The term Kush, in biblical context, often serves as a synonym for Ethiopia, or simply black in its original language, demonstrating how deeply this lineage was associated with dark-skinned populations across the ancient world. From the line of Kush emerged one of the most enigmatic figures in biblical genealogy, Nimrod, described as a mighty hunter before the Lord. His legacy presents a complex tapestry of achievement and controversy. Biblical accounts associate Nimrod with the founding of great cities including Babylon and Nineveh, centers of power that would dominate the Mesopotamian landscape. Some interpretations suggest his descendants became the people of Samaria, while others connect him to the establishment of early urban centers in Africa. The narrative surrounding Nimrod has been subject to various interpretations throughout history, with some traditions viewing him as a figure of disobedience whose ambitions led to the division of peoples. Yet his story remains integral to understanding how Kush's lineage extended its influence beyond Africa proper, creating connections between African roots and Mesopotamian civilizations. Misraim, Ham's second son, carried a name that would become permanently etched in the geography of North Africa. The term Misraim serves as the Hebrew name for Egypt, and Semitic peoples to this day refer to Egypt as Misr, preserving this ancient connection. Biblical tradition identifies Misraim as the progenitor of the ancient Egyptians, the builders of pyramids, the developers of hieroglyphics, the masters of mathematics and astronomy. But his influence extended beyond the Nile Valley to include other North African populations, the dark-skinned Tuaregs and Berbers, whose cultures and languages still echo these ancient connections. The Psalms make specific reference to Egypt as the land of Ham, reinforcing this genealogical link between Misraim's descendants and one of history's most celebrated civilizations. This connection establishes the Egyptian people firmly within the African family tree as traced through biblical genealogy. Put, the third son of Ham, represents another crucial branch of the African genealogical tree. His name, derived from a word meaning landmark in ancient languages, suggests a connection to territorial boundaries and clan identities. Biblical scholars identify Put as the ancestor of the Black Libyans and several other African peoples, particularly those associated with hunting communities and clan-based societies in northern regions of the continent. While less prominent in biblical narratives than his brothers Kush and Misraim, Put's lineage demonstrates the diversity within Ham's descendants, representing populations that maintained distinct cultural identities while sharing common ancestral roots. The inclusion of Put in the genealogical record ensures that our understanding of Ham's legacy encompasses the full spectrum of African peoples, from the great civilization builders to the clan-based societies that populated various regions. Canaan, the youngest of Ham's four sons, presents perhaps the most challenging narrative within this genealogical framework. Identified as the father of the Canaanite peoples who inhabited the land that would later become Israel, Canaan's story becomes intertwined with one of the most misinterpreted passages in Scripture. The biblical account describes an incident where Noah pronounces a curse specifically upon Canaan, not upon Ham or his other sons, following an uncomfortable family episode. This singular curse, limited in its scope to Canaan and his descendants, has been tragically misapplied throughout history, to all people of African descent. The distinction is crucial. While Kush, Misraim, and Put carry no such curse in the biblical text, Canaan's narrative requires careful examination to separate historical misinterpretation from accurate biblical interpretation, a task we will undertake more fully in subsequent explorations. When we step back to view the complete picture of Ham's legacy, a powerful narrative emerges, one that connects his lineage directly to some of Africa's most significant civilizations and peoples. From the pyramids of Egypt founded by Misraim's descendants to the kingdom of Kush that dominated the Upper Nile, from the Libyan peoples springing from Put's line to the various African populations tracing their origins to Kush's prolific offspring, the genealogical record paints a picture of profound cultural and historical significance. This is not a heritage of curse or inferiority, but rather one of achievement, resilience, and divine purpose. The biblical account, when read in its proper context, establishes Ham's descendants as founders of civilizations, builders of kingdoms, and bearers of cultures that would influence human history for millennia. This understanding forms the essential foundation for reclaiming the proud biblical heritage of African peoples. With this genealogical foundation firmly established, our journey now turns toward the prophetic dimensions of this heritage. The lineages of Kush, Misraim, Put, and Canaan do not merely represent historical connections. They form the backdrop against which specific biblical prophecies concerning African peoples unfold. Ancient texts contain remarkable oracles and promises directed toward the descendants of these very nations, prophecies that have often been overlooked or misunderstood in conventional biblical interpretation. As we move forward, we will examine how these genealogical roots connect to prophetic declarations in books like Isaiah, Psalms, and Zephaniah, texts that speak directly to the destiny and divine purpose of African peoples. The family tree we have traced becomes the living connection through which we can access these profound biblical revelations about Black heritage and identity. In the heart of ancient Kushite civilizations, where the Nile's waters carved empires from stone and sand, the legacy of Kush, Ham's firstborn, unfolds with profound resonance. The kingdom of Kush, rising from the fertile banks of what is now Sudan and Ethiopia, stands as a testament to African ingenuity and power, its pyramids echoing the grandeur of Egypt, yet bearing a distinct sovereign identity. This was not merely a realm of conquest, but a cradle of culture, where Kushite influence stretched across continents, from the heart of Africa to the shores of South India, embedding itself in the genealogical tapestry of biblical prophecy. References in books like Isaiah and Zephaniah hint at Ethiopia's enduring role in divine narratives, suggesting that Kush's descendants were destined for moments of spiritual awakening and global significance. The very soil of Kush, rich with history, whispers of a people whose story is interwoven with prophecies of resilience and favor, setting the stage for revelations that affirm their place in sacred texts. Transitioning to the context of Egyptian biblical narratives, the lineage of Misraim, another of Ham's sons, reveals a deep connection to prophecies that have shaped understandings of Africa's spiritual destiny. In Psalms 78-51 and other passages, Egypt is explicitly tied to the tents of Ham, underscoring Misraim's role as the progenitor of the ancient Egyptians and related North African peoples like the Berbers and Tuaregs. These scriptural references, often viewed through the lens of divine judgment or redemption, have been interpreted over centuries as affirmations of Egypt's centrality in biblical history. Scholars note that prophecies concerning Egypt, such as those in Isaiah chapter 19, which speak of its eventual turning to God, highlight a narrative not of perpetual curse, but of transformative potential, linking Misraim's descendants to a heritage of cultural and religious influence that challenges simplistic readings. Venturing into ancient Libyan and broader African contexts, the often overlooked legacy of Put, Ham's son, emerges with subtle yet significant prophetic implications. The name Put, derived from words meaning landmark, points to his descendants as foundational to clans of hunters and settlers in regions like Libya, with biblical references hinting at their inclusion in broader divine plans. Though minor in scriptural prominence, these connections, such as allusions in genealogical lists, suggest that Put's lineage contributed to the diverse tapestry of African peoples, from the black Libyans to other groups whose histories are etched into the continent's landscape. This exploration underscores a critical insight. Even the quieter threads of Ham's genealogy carry weight, reminding us that every branch of this ancestral tree holds keys to understanding prophecies that celebrate, rather than marginalize, African heritage. Within the debated biblical passage of Genesis chapter 9, the narrative of Canaan, Ham's son, introduces a pivotal moment often misconstrued to unjust ends. Here, Noah's curse falls solely upon Canaan after Ham witnesses his father's nakedness, an act of disrespect met with a specific, limited judgment that never extends to Ham or his other descendants. Yet, throughout history, this incident has been distorted to propagate the false idea that all African peoples are cursed, a misinterpretation used to justify centuries of oppression and cultural erasure. By examining the text objectively, it becomes clear that Canaan's curse was confined to his lineage, the Canaanites, while Kush, Misraim, and Put remained untouched, their legacies blessed and integral to Africa's story. This clarification not only corrects a grave error, but sets the stage for deeper analysis, revealing how such distortions have obscured the true, empowering prophecies tied to Ham's lineage. In the post-flood era, Ham's life unfolds as a saga of longevity and mystery, with tradition suggesting he lived around 600 years, a span mirroring his brother Shem's and symbolizing his enduring impact on generations. This remarkable age allowed Ham to witness the rise of his descendants, civilizations, from the Kushite kingdoms to the Egyptian dynasties, embedding his legacy in the very fabric of ancient Africa. Theories about his burial site abound, with some accounts pointing to Ethiopia's highlands, others to Sudan's deserts, or even Egypt's secretive tombs, each location shrouded in the allure of undiscovered truths. These speculations, drawn from ancient texts and oral histories, infuse Ham's story with a sense of enigmatic presence, suggesting that his final resting place may hold clues to the broader prophecies that define his lineage's destiny. Drawing from the Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text revered in early traditions, additional layers of Ham's narrative come to light, enriching our understanding of his post-flood endeavors. This manuscript describes Ham as the first to establish a city after the deluge, naming it after his wife, a testament to his role as a pioneer in rebuilding civilization. It also recounts family tensions, particularly Canaan's choice to settle in lands designated for Shem, against the wishes of Ham and his other sons, who saw Africa as their rightful inheritance. These insights from Jubilees not only corroborate biblical genealogies, but add depth to the conflicts and choices that shaped Ham's legacy, emphasizing that his descendants' stories are woven with themes of loyalty, dispute, and divine purpose, all of which pave the way for the prophetic explorations to come. Synthesizing the genealogical threads of Ham's sons, Cush, Misraim, Put, and Canaan, reveals a cohesive foundation that underpins the upcoming prophetic revelations. Cush's lineage gave rise to empires like Ethiopia and Nubia, Misraim to the ancient Egyptians and North African peoples, Put to Libyan clans, and Canaan to the Canaanites, each branch contributing uniquely to the tapestry of African and Black heritage. This overview not only clarifies their individual roles, but emphasizes how their collective stories form a bedrock for biblical prophecies that affirm, rather than deny, the significance of these nations. By recapping these connections, the narrative ensures clarity and readiness, seamlessly bridging the genealogical groundwork to the profound insights that await in the exploration of specific prophecies. Reflecting on modern implications, the understanding of Ham's lineage ignites a powerful sense of cultural pride, linking ancient biblical accounts to contemporary African identity. This reclamation of heritage serves as an antidote to historical distortions, empowering communities across the diaspora to see themselves in the grand narrative of Scripture, not as cursed or marginal, but as central figures in God's plan. From the arts and sciences to faith and leadership, the achievements of African peoples today echo the resilience and influence prophesied in ages past, encouraging viewers to embrace this knowledge as a source of unity and strength. By connecting these dots, the narrative elevates the stakes, transforming historical insight into a living, breathing force for personal and collective empowerment. Building anticipation for the next part, the narrative hints at the specific prophecies that will soon be unveiled, teasing the depths of books like Isaiah, Psalms, and Zephaniah. These texts, rich with references to Kush, Egypt, and other African nations, promise to reveal how biblical oracles have long affirmed the destiny and dignity of black peoples. The foreshadowing here is deliberate, suggesting that these prophecies will not only correct misconceptions, but illuminate a path of spiritual and cultural renewal, tailored to resonate with the heritage explored thus far. This open loop ensures that curiosity remains piqued, urging viewers to stay engaged for the revelations that will transform their understanding of Scripture and self. Bridging the foundational genealogies to the revelations ahead, this transition recaps the established basis of Ham's lineage, how Kush, Misraim, Put, and Canaan each forged nations integral to Africa's biblical and historical identity. With this groundwork firmly laid, the stage is set for a deep dive into the prophetic narratives that draw from these roots, promising to uncover how scriptures from Isaiah to Zephaniah speak directly to the experiences and futures of African peoples. The flow from genealogical charts to prophetic themes is seamless, ensuring that viewers are prepared for an immersive journey into the mysteries that affirm black heritage, all while maintaining the narrative continuity that has kept them hooked from the start. In the ancient scrolls of Isaiah, a profound vision unfolds, one that casts its gaze upon the land of Kush, a realm we now know as Ethiopia. Isaiah chapter 18, verses 1 to 7 presents an enigmatic prophecy, often described as a message to a people scattered and peeled, a nation terrible from their beginning onward. This passage, shrouded in symbolic language, speaks of vessels of bulrushes upon the waters, and a people tall and smooth of skin, directly referencing the Ethiopian people. Interpretations vary. Some scholars view it as a divine warning against alliances with foreign powers, while others see a promise of Ethiopia's enduring resilience and eventual divine favor. The imagery of wings symbolizes swift messengers or divine intervention, echoing the majestic landscapes of the Ethiopian highlands, where history and prophecy intertwine. This prophecy underscores the significant role of African nations in biblical narratives, hinting at a destiny woven with strength and spiritual prominence, setting the stage for deeper explorations into how such texts affirm the heritage of black peoples. Turning to the poetic depths of Psalms, verse 68 to 31 resonates with a powerful declaration. Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God. This line, though brief, carries immense weight, interpreted as a prophecy of spiritual awakening and profound influence. Historically, it has been seen as a foretelling of Ethiopia's early adoption of Christianity, making it one of the first nations to embrace the faith, with traditions dating back to the 4th century. In modern context, this stretching of hands symbolizes the ongoing contributions of African and diaspora communities to global faith movements, from the rise of influential churches to the deep-rooted spiritual practices that have shaped cultures across continents. The imagery evokes scenes of uplifted hands in worship, reflecting a legacy of resilience and divine connection that challenges any narrative of marginalization, reinforcing the idea that black heritage is central to the biblical story of redemption and hope. Within the prophetic book of Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 10 unveils a vision of inclusion. From beyond the rivers of Ethiopia my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring mine offering. This passage speaks to a gathering of worshippers from distant lands, specifically pointing to regions beyond Ethiopia's great rivers, such as the Nile and its tributaries. It emphasizes the universal scope of divine plans, where African peoples are not peripheral but integral participants in a global spiritual community. The prophecy highlights the concept of suppliants, those who seek God earnestly, suggesting that descendants of Kush and other African nations would play key roles in bringing offerings of faith and devotion. Maps illustrating these river systems and symbolic gatherings underscore how this text broadens the narrative, affirming that black identities are woven into the fabric of biblical prophecy as active, honored contributors to humanity's sacred journey. Venturing into the lesser-known corners of the Old Testament, books like Amos, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel contains subtle yet significant references to African peoples and lands. In Amos chapter 9, verse 7, God questions, "Have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Kir," implicitly acknowledging the movements of nations, including those from African regions. Jeremiah chapter 46, verse 9, mentions the Ethiopians in the context of divine judgments, while Ezekiel chapter 30, verses 4-5, speaks of Cush in prophecies against Egypt. These scattered mentions, though brief, accumulate into a compelling tapestry that reinforces the presence and importance of African descendants in biblical history. When studied collectively, they challenge oversimplified interpretations and highlight the cumulative impact of these prophecies on understanding Black heritage, not as an afterthought, but as a continuous thread in the divine narrative. Synthesizing the prophetic voices of the Old Testament reveals a coherent and empowering message. African peoples are consistently affirmed in roles of strength, inclusion, and divine favor. From Isaiah's visions of Ethiopia to Psalms, declarations of spiritual reach, and Zephaniah's inclusive gatherings, these texts collectively emphasize themes of redemption, resilience, and purpose. They counter historical stereotypes by portraying nations like Cush and Egypt not as cursed or marginalized, but as integral to God's plans, whether as bearers of offerings, centers of faith, or symbols of enduring legacy. This thematic unity underscores a broader biblical truth. The heritage of Black peoples is one of honor and significance, rooted in ancient prophecies that speak to identity, destiny, and the unfolding story of humanity's connection to the divine. As the journey through the Old Testament prophecies draws to a transitional point, the narrative naturally bridges into the New Testament, where echoes of these ancient promises find new expression. Hints emerge in texts like the Acts of the Apostles, where an Ethiopian eunuch, a high official of Candace, queen of the Ethiopians, encounters Philip and embraces Christianity, fulfilling the prophetic strands of inclusion and spiritual awakening. Similarly, the Gospels reference figures from African regions, suggesting a continuity that will be explored in depth. This seamless flow from Old to New covenants ensures that the story of Black heritage remains unbroken, inviting viewers to anticipate how these foundational prophecies are reaffirmed and expanded in the teachings of the early church, setting the stage for revelations that deepen our understanding of biblical mysteries. Delving deeper into the prophetic significance of Cush, it becomes evident that this ancient kingdom symbolizes the broader representation of Black nations in biblical imagery. Beyond individual references, Cush appears in contexts that speak to power, mystery, and divine attention, such as in Isaiah chapter 20, where the prophet's actions concerning Cush and Egypt serve as signs of God's judgments and mercies. Historically, the kingdom of Cush was a formidable civilization, and in prophecy, it often embodies the resilience and spiritual potential of African peoples. Modern interpretations connect this to the diaspora's struggles and triumphs, illustrating how Cush's legacy challenges simplistic readings and affirms that Black identities are central to prophetic narratives, not merely footnotes in a larger story. In the biblical portrayal of Egypt, prophecies extend beyond historical accounts to convey messages of redemption and transformation. Texts like Isaiah chapter 19 feature an oracle concerning Egypt, declaring, "In that day shall there be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt," suggesting a future where Egypt turns to God and is healed. This aligns with the lineage of Misraim, Ham's son, whose descendants include the ancient Egyptians and other North African peoples. Such prophecies emphasize that Egypt's role is not static. It evolves from a place of oppression in Exodus to one of potential salvation, reflecting the complex, multifaceted heritage of Ham's lineage. By examining these passages, the narrative corrects misconceptions, showing that prophecies about Egypt often carry hopes of renewal, further enriching the understanding of African contributions to biblical history. Identifying overarching themes in the Old Testament prophecies about African peoples reveals a consistent emphasis on redemption, influence, and divine purpose. These themes collectively counter negative stereotypes and historical misinterpretations by highlighting how nations like Ethiopia, Egypt, and Kush are portrayed as recipients of God's attention and agents in spiritual narratives. Redemption appears in promises of healing and inclusion, influence in descriptions of their roles in global events, and divine purpose in the affirmation of their identities within sacred history. This unifying message empowers contemporary audiences, fostering a sense of pride and belonging by demonstrating that Black heritage is not ancillary, but essential to the biblical worldview, woven into prophecies that speak to universal truths of dignity and destiny. As this chapter concludes, the narrative subtly foreshadows the deeper dives ahead, teasing the specific prophecies that will be unraveled in the next segment. Verses like Isaiah chapter 45, verse 14, which speaks of the wealth of Egypt and the merchandise of Ethiopia coming to God's people, and others from books such as Daniel and Revelation, promise revelations that will clarify their meanings for Black heritage. These upcoming analyses will delve into how individual passages, when examined in detail, affirm the prophetic destiny of African peoples, offering insights that challenge outdated interpretations and inspire a renewed sense of identity. The stage is set for a journey into the heart of biblical mysteries, where each prophecy uncovered will further illuminate the profound connections between Scripture and the legacy of Black nations. In the profound oracles of Isaiah, a vision unfolds, one that speaks not of condemnation, but of redemption for the land of Egypt. Isaiah chapter 19 unveils a future where Egypt, a nation born from Ham's son Misraim, undergoes a divine transformation. The prophecy declares, "The Lord will strike Egypt, striking and healing. They will return to the Lord, and He will respond to their pleas and heal them." This is not a narrative of eternal wrath, but one of restoration, where Egypt turns to God and finds wholeness. For the descendants of Ham, this oracle resonates deeply. It signifies that their heritage is intertwined with a promise of spiritual awakening and divine favor. The imagery shifts from ancient plagues to a scene of unity, where an altar to the Lord stands in Egypt, symbolizing inclusion in God's covenant. This prophetic hope reaffirms that the lineage of Ham is marked not by curse, but by the potential for redemption and enduring significance in biblical history. Within the poetic tapestry of Psalms, a verse emerges that celebrates the diversity of God's people. Psalms 87-4 proclaims, "I will record Rahab and Babylon among those who acknowledge me, Philistia too, and Tyre, along with Cush, and will say, 'This one was born in Zion.'" Here, Cush, representing the African peoples descended from Ham's first son, is explicitly acknowledged alongside other nations. This is not a mere listing, but a profound affirmation. Diverse cultures, including those from Africa, are recognized as part of God's divine plan. The mention of Rahab, often symbolizing chaos or opposition, and Babylon, a seat of power, alongside Cush, underscores that no people are excluded. For Black heritage, this verse serves as a cornerstone. It dismantles any notion of marginalization, instead placing Cushites at the heart of spiritual identity and global community. Across the biblical landscape, prophecies echo with themes of strength and inclusion for African nations, directly countering narratives of weakness or inferiority. Texts like Zephaniah chapter 3 verse 10 speak of suppliants from beyond the rivers of Cush, while Isaiah chapter 18 highlights Ethiopia's role in God's plans, describing them as a people tall and smooth-skinned. These passages do not depict subjugation. Instead, they affirm the power, influence, and resilience of Cush and Egypt. They portray African peoples as active participants in divine history, wielding authority and receiving divine attention. This collective voice challenges centuries of misinterpretation that sought to diminish these legacies. By emphasizing prophecies that celebrate rather than condemn, the narrative reclaims a heritage of strength, one where Ham's descendants are seen as pillars of biblical prophecy, endowed with dignity and purpose. The figure of Nimrod, often shrouded in controversy, demands a reassessment in light of prophetic themes. As Cush's son, Nimrod is described in Genesis as a mighty hunter before the Lord, and the founder of kingdoms like Babylon. While some interpretations have cast him as rebellious, the prophetic layers reveal a more nuanced story, one of leadership and influence that shaped ancient civilizations. His legacy is not solely one of defiance, but also of the organizational prowess that underpinned early urban centers in Mesopotamia and Africa. This balanced view corrects oversimplifications that misuse his narrative to justify negative stereotypes. Instead, it highlights how Nimrod's story, when understood within its full context, contributes to the rich tapestry of Ham's lineage, reflecting the complex roles African-descended peoples played in founding and sustaining mighty empires. When woven together, the prophetic messages from Isaiah, Psalms, Zephaniah, and others form a coherent tapestry of affirmation for Black and African peoples. Isaiah's oracle on Egypt promises healing and inclusion. Psalms places Kush among the acknowledged nations. Zephaniah envisions worship from African lands. These are not isolated incidents but interconnected threads that consistently emphasize dignity, redemption, and divine favor. The scriptures repeatedly highlight how Ham's descendants, from the Ethiopians to the Egyptians, are integral to God's narrative, not as cursed outliers, but as blessed participants. This synthesis reinforces a unified message. The biblical prophecy concerning Black peoples is one of empowerment, resilience, and an unbroken connection to a heritage that shapes both ancient history and modern identity. The resonance of these ancient prophecies extends powerfully into the present, influencing contemporary movements and personal identities within African and diaspora communities. In an era where cultural pride is revitalized, verses like Psalm 68-31, Ethiopia shall soon stretch out her hands unto God, inspire spiritual and social awakening, echoing in movements that celebrate Black excellence and heritage. These prophecies are not relics of the past. They are living texts that empower individuals to see their history as one of divine purpose and strength. By connecting these biblical affirmations to modern contexts, from artistic expressions to academic pursuits, viewers are encouraged to find personal meaning, transforming ancient words into sources of inspiration that fuel a renewed sense of identity and collective pride. As this exploration of prophecies deepens, a critical turn approaches, one that addresses the misinterpretations that have long distorted biblical understanding. The curse of Ham, a narrative wrongly applied to entire populations, stands as a pivotal issue to unravel. Promising clarity and empowerment, the journey ahead will dismantle these falsehoods, revealing how accurate interpretation restores cultural dignity. This foreshadowing builds anticipation, ensuring that the revelations to come will not only correct historical errors, but also equip viewers with truths that affirm their heritage and reshape their worldview. Recapping the prophetic insights, key passages stand out. Isaiah 18's focus on Ethiopia, Psalm 68's vision of outstretched hands, and Zephaniah's inclusion of suppliants from Cush. Each prophecy, whether from major or minor books, collectively underscores a message of affirmation that Black and African peoples are central to biblical destiny. This recap solidifies the understanding that these texts consistently reject narratives of curse or marginalization, instead highlighting roles of strength, worship, and redemption. By reinforcing these highlights, the narrative ensures that the core message of cultural and spiritual pride remains clear and impactful as the journey progresses. The impact of these prophecies reaches beyond Scripture, reshaping the broader historical narrative of African contributions to civilization. Archaeological findings, such as the ruins of Kushite pyramids or Egyptian temples, align with biblical accounts, providing tangible evidence of the grandeur described in prophecies. Linguistic studies and genetic research further corroborate the migrations and influences of Ham's descendants across Africa. This interdisciplinary evidence encourages a reevaluation. African history is not one of isolation but of innovation and global engagement. By connecting prophecy to historical and archaeological contexts, the narrative empowers a renewed appreciation for how African peoples have shaped human history, countering outdated stereotypes with a legacy of enduring significance. With the prophetic foundation firmly established, a tapestry of redemption, strength, and inclusion for Ham's lineage, the stage is set to confront the misconceptions that have obscured these truths. The journey now pivots toward correcting errors like the curse of Ham, armed with the clarity that prophecies affirm rather than diminish black heritage. This transition is seamless, bridging the revelations of the past with the urgent need to address misinterpretations that impact identity and culture. As the narrative moves forward, it promises to dismantle false beliefs, ensuring that the empowering message of biblical prophecy is fully realized and embraced. Within the sacred text of Genesis, chapter 9, verses 20 to 27, lies a narrative that has been profoundly distorted through the centuries. The account describes Noah, having become intoxicated from the fruit of the vine, lying uncovered within his tent. His son, Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father's nakedness and reported this to his two brothers, Shem and Japheth, who proceeded to cover their father, while carefully avoiding the sight of his condition. Upon awakening, Noah learned what his youngest son had done to him. The subsequent curse, however, was not pronounced upon Ham himself. Instead, Noah's wrath fell squarely upon Canaan, declaring, "Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brothers." The biblical record is explicit. The curse targeted one specific grandson, a fact that has been systematically overlooked to serve a darker, more insidious agenda. The scope of this divine pronouncement is critically limited. The curse was placed solely upon Canaan and his direct descendants, the Canaanite peoples, who would later inhabit the land that bears his name. Ham's other sons, Cush, the progenitor of mighty African kingdoms like Ethiopia and Nubia, Misraim, the recognized founder of ancient Egypt, and Put, the ancestor of Libyan peoples, were never included in this judgment. They remained entirely outside the curse's boundary, their lineages blessed and destined for historical significance. This precise, narrow focus was deliberately ignored, and the narrative was weaponized. The false curse of Ham was forged, a theological corruption used for centuries to justify the subjugation, enslavement, and dehumanization of entire populations of African descent, creating a religious pretext for one of history's greatest moral crimes. The historical consequences of this misinterpretation are a stain upon the tapestry of human civilization. From the era of the transatlantic slave trade to the era of Jim Crow and beyond, this corrupted reading of Scripture was invoked to legitimize a brutal system of racial hierarchy. It provided a twisted divine sanction for treating people of African ancestry as inherently inferior, as beings destined for servitude. This was not a minor scholarly error, but a foundational pillar of institutionalized racism, causing incalculable suffering, fracturing families, and eroding the cultural and spiritual identity of millions. The damage inflicted by this single, willful misreading echoes through generations, a sobering testament to the power of a lie, when cloaked in the authority of a sacred text. In direct opposition to this historical distortion, modern biblical scholarship and theology offer a powerful corrective. Leading scholars across disciplines unanimously reject the notion that the curse of Canaan applies to all African peoples. They affirm that the lineages of Cush, Misraim, and Put, the foundational pillars of African civilization, are portrayed throughout the Bible as nations of great power, wealth, and at times divine favor. The narrative of Ham is not one of a cursed heritage but of a blessed one, a lineage that produced pharaohs and queens, builders of pyramids and centers of learning. This accurate interpretation reclaims the narrative, transforming it from a tool of oppression into a source of empowerment and a restored sense of dignified, ancient ancestry. Therefore, the correction is clear and unequivocal. The curse was placed on Canaan alone. It was never intended for, and does not apply to, the vast and diverse peoples of Africa descended from Ham's other sons. Understanding this truth is more than an academic exercise. It is an act of cultural and spiritual reclamation. It shatters a centuries-old lie and restores a legacy of pride. It allows for a reconnection with a biblical heritage that speaks of strength, sovereignty, and significance, freeing the narrative from the chains of a fabricated curse and replacing it with the enduring truth of a blessed and profound inheritance. In the silent depths of ancient ruins and buried cities, archaeology speaks volumes, unearthing truths that resonate with biblical accounts of African peoples. Excavations across the Nile Valley have revealed the grandeur of Kushite pyramids and Egyptian temples, their structures echoing the genealogies traced to Ham's descendants. Artifacts, from intricate pottery to royal inscriptions, corroborate the existence of powerful kingdoms like Kush and Misraim, aligning with prophecies that foretold their roles in divine narratives. These findings, unearthed by dedicated scholars, provide tangible proof that the biblical record is not mere myth, but a historical tapestry woven with African threads, reinforcing the lineage of Ham's children as foundational to ancient civilizations. Beyond the dust of excavations, linguistics and genetics offer compelling cross-disciplinary validation. Studies of African language families, such as the Nilo-Saharan and Afro-Asiatic groups, reveal roots that intertwine with biblical descriptions of Ham's lineage, where names like Kush and Misraim find echoes in modern dialects. Genetic research further illuminates this connection, with DNA markers tracing migratory patterns that align with the spread of Ham's descendants across the continent. This convergence of science and scripture dismantles doubts, showcasing how the biblical genealogies are not isolated tales but reflections of a shared heritage, etched into the very fabric of African identity. In the vibrant tapestry of African oral traditions, stories passed down through generations whisper of origins that mirror biblical narratives. Tales from West African griots or East African elders often speak of great floods, ancestral founders, and migrations that parallel the accounts of Noah's sons and Ham's progeny. These oral histories, rich with symbolism and cultural memory, serve as living testimonies to the accuracy of scriptural records. By honoring these traditions, we acknowledge that full understanding of the biblical past requires listening to the voices of those who have preserved these truths long before pen met parchment, adding depth and authenticity to the reclaimed heritage. When archaeology, linguistics, and oral traditions converge, they form an unassailable foundation for the corrected biblical narrative. The pyramids of Kush, the genetic trails of Ham's lineage, and the echoing stories of elders all point to one truth. The accounts of African peoples in the Bible are historically robust and culturally affirmed. This synthesis not only validates the genealogies and prophecies discussed, but also empowers a reinterpretation free from past distortions. By weaving these threads together, we see a clear picture emerge, one where Ham's descendants stand not cursed, but celebrated, their legacy supported by a triad of evidence that reinforces the accuracy and importance of these ancient texts. As we bridge from historical insights to the journey's culmination, the path ahead invites reflection on the profound implications of these discoveries. The corrections to misconceptions, supported by archaeological, linguistic, and oral evidence, pave the way for a final exploration of cultural pride and divine purpose. This transition sets the stage for the concluding message, where the reclaimed narratives will inspire action and ongoing engagement. With the foundation firmly laid, the next segment promises to unite these threads into a powerful call to embrace identity and continue the quest for truth, ensuring the story's impact resonates far beyond this chapter. From the vast chronicles of biblical history emerges a profound truth, one that reshapes our understanding of identity and destiny. This journey through Scripture has revealed how the lineage of Ham, far from being cursed, produced the foundational peoples of Africa. The mighty Cushites who built empires along the Nile, the Egyptians whose civilization dazzled the ancient world, and the numerous other nations springing from Misraim, Put, and their brothers. The prophetic voices of Isaiah, Psalms, and Zephaniah did not overlook these descendants, but instead affirmed their place in divine narratives, speaking of Ethiopia stretching out her hands to God and Egypt finding redemption. Most critically, the distorted curse of Canaan has been untangled from the rich tapestry of Ham's heritage, restoring a narrative of dignity to Black and African peoples. Understanding these truths is more than an academic exercise. It is an awakening. To recognize that biblical prophecy and genealogy affirm the greatness of African civilizations is to reclaim a legacy of strength, innovation, and spiritual significance. This knowledge becomes a wellspring of cultural pride, a unifying force that transcends borders and generations. It invites every viewer of African descent to see themselves not through the lens of historical marginalization, but as heirs to kingdoms and prophecies that shaped human history. Let this reclaimed identity inspire personal confidence and collective action, fueling a renaissance of cultural awareness and shared purpose in communities across the globe. This revelation is just the beginning. To continue unearthing these transformative biblical mysteries, make sure you subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell. By joining our community, you ensure that you won't miss the upcoming deep dives into other scriptural enigmas, hidden genealogies, and powerful prophecies that further illuminate the heritage and future of Black peoples according to the Bible. Your engagement helps build a platform dedicated to truth and empowerment. The journey into biblical mysteries is far from over. In future episodes, we will delve into the prophetic significance of figures like the Queen of Sheba, explore the African presence in the early church, and decode ancient texts that speak to the global influence of Ham's descendants. Each video will build on these foundations, offering new layers of insight and evidence. Stay tuned for content that continues to challenge misconceptions and celebrate the profound connections between Scripture and African heritage. Reflecting on this exploration, it becomes clear that accurate interpretation of sacred texts holds transformative power. Correcting centuries of misinterpretation restores not only historical accuracy, but also cultural soul. This narrative, once buried, now stands as a testament to resilience and truth. Share this message with others. Spread the video through your networks and discussions. Let this be a catalyst for wider awareness, a ripple that expands into a wave of renewed identity and scholarly curiosity about the true biblical narrative concerning Black peoples. Thank you for embarking on this profound journey through prophecy and heritage. Your viewership and engagement make this mission of enlightenment possible. As we conclude, remember to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and look out for our next episodes, where we will continue to uncover the timeless mysteries of the Bible and their significance for today. Together, we are reclaiming history and shaping a future rooted in truth.